The glorious fleet. The massive command ship Eternal Victory drifted through the void of space like a metal mountain. Its hull stretched for 20 kilometers, covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single shot. Admiral Cathvar stood on the bridge looking out at the vast fleet that followed his flagship. 50,000 warships filled the darkness around them, their lights twinkling like deadly stars. Cathvar was proud of his fleet. The Zephyrian Imperial Armada had never lost a battle. They had conquered 300 worlds in the past century. Every species they met either surrendered quickly or died slowly. The Admiral's pale blue skin showed the ritual scars of victory, one for each world he had claimed for the Empire. Admiral, called his second-in-command, Commander Vexthai. The intelligence reports on the target world are ready for your review. Cathvar turned away from the viewing port. His four eyes focused on the holographic display that appeared before him. A small blue and green planet rotated slowly in the projection. The data scrolled past in the common galactic language. Earth, Cathvar read aloud. Third planet from a yellow star. Primitive civilization. Technology level approximately 2,000 years behind standard galactic advancement. Population 7 billion. No defensive satellites detected. No sign of energy shields or plasma weapons. Commander Vexthai nodded. Our scouts report they have barely reached their own moon. Their fastest ships use chemical propulsion. They fight wars with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. The Admiral laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Chemical explosives? Do they throw rocks at each other as well? The bridge crew joined in the laughter. These humans sounded more primitive than the cave-dwelling Gorthak they had conquered 50 years ago. The planet shows high concentrations of rare metals, Vexthai continued, especially iridium and platinum. The climate is suitable for Zephyrian colonization. The native population could provide adequate slave labor if properly managed. Cathvar studied the planet again. It looked peaceful. White clouds swirled over blue oceans. He could see the lights of cities on the dark side of the world. Soon those lights would belong to the Zephyrian Empire. Estimated resistance level? The Admiral asked. Minimal to none, Vexthai replied. Intelligence suggests their military forces are divided among many small nations. They appear to spend most of their time fighting each other, rather than developing proper defenses. A single dreadnought should be sufficient to secure their surrender. But Cathvar had not become admiral by taking chances. We will use the full fleet. These primitives will serve as an example to other worlds in this sector. When word spreads of how quickly Earth fell, other planets will surrender without resistance. The communications officer spoke up from her station. Admiral, we are receiving the final clearance from High Command. The conquest of Earth is approved. We are authorized to use any means necessary. Cathvar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Set course for the Sol system. Maximum hyperspace velocity. We will arrive at the edge of their system in 6 months. That will give them time to detect our approach and properly despair. The fleet began to move as one massive unit. Hyperspace engines charged with power that could light up a small star. Reality twisted around the ships as they slipped into the faster-than-light dimension. Space folded, and the Armada vanished from normal space. During the journey, Cathvar reviewed everything known about humans. They seemed like such a young species. Their oldest civilizations were only a few thousand years old. They had discovered fire recently, developed agriculture even more recently, and had only just begun to explore space. The intelligence files showed humans to be a divided species. They had hundreds of different nations, each with its own military. Their weapons were crude but numerous. They had nuclear devices, but these were primitive fusion bombs that produced more radiation than actual destruction, nothing that could threaten even the smallest Zephyrian scout ship. They do seem to have one unusual trait, Commander Vexthai mentioned during one of their planning sessions. The psychological profile suggests they are unusually aggressive for such a primitive species. They appear to have been in constant warfare throughout their recorded history. Cathvar waved a dismissive hand. Primitive aggression means nothing against superior technology. A wild animal may be fierce, but it still falls to a hunter's weapon. The months passed quickly. The fleet maintained perfect formation as it traveled through hyperspace. Crew members practiced their combat drills and studied the layout of human cities. Landing forces prepared their equipment for the ground invasion that would follow the space battle. As they neared the Sol system, long-range sensors began to pick up human transmissions. Radio signals, primitive data streams, and what appeared to be entertainment broadcasts. The intelligence team listened to these communications and found them amusing. They broadcast stories about alien invasions, one officer reported to the admiral. Fictional tales where aliens come to conquer Earth. In most of these stories, the humans somehow win against impossible odds. The bridge crew found this hilarious. The idea that such primitive beings could defeat the Zephyrian Armada was beyond ridiculous. It would be like insects defeating a starship. Perhaps they are trying to prepare themselves mentally for our arrival, Kethvar suggested, though their fiction seems quite removed from the reality they will soon face. The sensors also detected human space activity. They had a few space stations orbiting their world and some small bases on their moon. None of these installations showed any sign of serious weapons. The humans seem to use their space technology mainly for communication and observation. They have some automated probes in the outer regions of their system, the sensor officer reported. Simple devices designed to study their star and the outer planets. Nothing that could threaten our approach. Admiral Kethvar was pleased. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. The humans were even more primitive than the initial reports had suggested. This would be the easiest conquest in Zephyrian history. On the final day of their journey, the admiral addressed his entire fleet through the communication system. 50,000 ship captains listened to his words. Warriors of the Empire, Kethvar began. Today we claim another world for our eternal glory. The planet Earth awaits our arrival. Its people know nothing of the power that approaches them. They have never faced the might of the Zephyrian Armada. Today they will learn why we rule the galaxy. Cheers echoed through the communication channels. Crew members throughout the fleet prepared for battle, though they expected little actual fighting. Most conquest operations ended with the target world's immediate surrender, once they witnessed the size of the Imperial fleet. In 6 hours, we will drop out of hyperspace at the edge of their system, the admiral continued. We will give them the standard time to surrender, 72 hours to consider their position and make the wise choice. If they are foolish enough to resist, we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. The fleet began its final approach. Reality twisted once more as the ships prepared to return to normal space. Weapon systems came online, shields powered up, 50,000 warships made ready for what they expected to be a very brief and one-sided battle. Admiral Kethvar stood on his bridge, watching the countdown timer. Soon he would add another victory scar to his collection. Soon the primitive world called Earth would kneel before the might of the Zephyrian Empire. The timer reached 0. Space exploded with light as the Imperial Armada returned to normal reality at the edge of the Sol system. First contact protocols the edge of the Sol system filled with the massive shapes of 50,000 warships. The Imperial Armada had arrived exactly where Admiral Kethvar planned, just beyond the orbit of the outermost planet. The fleet spread out in perfect battle formation, a display of power that had terrified countless worlds. All ships report successful transition to normal space, Commander Vexthai announced. Fleet formation is optimal. All weapon systems are online and ready. Admiral Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. He looked toward the inner system where the small blue planet waited. At this distance, Earth was just a tiny dot of light, but his sensors could already detect the radio chatter from the human worlds. Communications officer, begin monitoring all human transmissions, the Admiral ordered. I want to know how quickly they detect our presence. It did not take long. Within minutes, the communications array picked up excited chatter from various human installations. Their primitive detection systems had spotted the fleet almost immediately. Kethvar listened to the translated conversations with amusement. Unknown contacts on the edge of the system. Came one transmission from what appeared to be a military station. Massive energy signatures. Count is, this cannot be correct. Computer shows over 40,000 separate objects. Confirm your readings, replied another voice. Are you certain about those numbers? Running diagnostics now, but the signatures are consistent across all sensors. Whatever is out there, it is big. Really big, the Admiral smiled. Their fear was already beginning. He had seen this same pattern hundreds of times before. First came disbelief, then growing panic as the reality of their situation became clear. Admiral, the sensor officer called out, we are detecting increased activity throughout the human system. Multiple space stations are powering up communication arrays. Their moon bases appear to be going to high alert status. Excellent, Kethvar replied. Fear will make them more reasonable when we present our terms. But something seemed different about the human response. Instead of the usual pattern of panic and desperate military mobilization, the humans appeared to be following some kind of organized procedure. Their communications were calm and professional. not the frightened chatter he usually heard from primitive worlds. Interesting, Commander Vextai observed. They seem to have protocols for this situation. Most species we encounter have never considered the possibility of alien contact. Admiral Kethvar studied the sensor readings more carefully. The humans were activating systems throughout their solar system, but it did not look like a panic response. It looked more like they were following a predetermined plan. Perhaps they are more organized than we thought, the Admiral mused. No matter. Organization will not save them from superior firepower. After allowing the humans 6 hours to fully comprehend their situation, Kethvar decided it was time for the formal ultimatum. This was always his favorite part of a conquest. The moment when a species realized their fate was sealed. Open a communication channel to all human receivers, he commanded. Full power transmission on all frequencies they use. The communications officer worked at her controls. Channel open, Admiral. Broadcasting to the entire human system. Kethvar activated the translation matrix and began the speech he had given so many times before. His words would be automatically converted into whatever languages the humans used. People of Earth, the Admiral began, his voice carrying across space to reach every human receiver. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Armada. You now face the military might of the greatest empire in the galaxy. He paused to let that sink in. Usually by this point the target species was broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. Your world has been selected for incorporation into the Zephyrian Empire, he continued. Your primitive civilization will be improved through our guidance. Your resources will serve the greater good of the Empire. Your people will find purpose as productive members of our society. Still no panicked response from the humans. Their communication networks carried his message, but the replies were surprisingly calm. Various human governments acknowledged receiving the transmission and requested time to formulate an official response. By the authority granted to me by the Imperial High Command, Kethvar went on, I offer you this single opportunity for peaceful surrender. You have 72 hours to demonstrate your acceptance of Imperial rule. All military forces must stand down. All planetary leaders must report to designated landing zones for processing. The Admiral switched to a more threatening tone. If you choose to resist, you will face the full power of this armada. Our weapons can reduce your cities to ash. Our ships can crack your planet's crust. Your choice is simple. Surrender and live, or resist and die. He closed the communication channel and waited for the usual flood of desperate responses, but what came back was not what he expected. The first official reply came from something called the United Nations. Their representative appeared on the communication screen, an elderly human male wearing formal clothing. He looked remarkably calm for someone who had just received an ultimatum from 50,000 warships. Greetings, Admiral Kethvar, the human said politely. I am Secretary General Chen of the United Nations. We have received your message and are grateful for the time you have allowed us to respond. Kethvar frowned. This human showed no sign of fear. He spoke as if this was a normal diplomatic negotiation. We understand that you represent a powerful interstellar civilization, Secretary General Chen continued. This is indeed a historic moment for our species. We request permission to convene an emergency session of our global leadership to properly consider your proposal. The Admiral leaned forward in his command chair. Where were the pleas for mercy? Where were the offers of tribute? This human was treating the ultimatum like a business discussion. We will need the full 72 hours to ensure all Earth governments can participate in this decision, Chen went on. We hope you will understand that such a significant choice requires proper consultation with all parties. The communication ended, leaving Admiral Kethvar staring at the blank screen. In 300 conquests, he had never received such a calm, diplomatic response to an invasion ultimatum. Admiral, Commander Vextai said quietly, their response is unusual. Indeed, Kethvar agreed. They show no fear. Either they are remarkable actors or they are too primitive to understand their situation. Over the next several hours, more human governments sent similar responses. All were polite, professional, and strangely confident. The humans seemed to be treating this as a normal diplomatic situation, rather than a life-or-death crisis. The Admiral watched the sensor readings as human activity continued throughout their system. Ships moved between their space stations. Communication traffic increased dramatically, but none of it looked like military preparation. It looked more like Coordination. Perhaps they are simply in shock, suggested the tactical officer. Some species freeze when faced with overwhelming force. But Kethavar was beginning to feel uncertain. Something about this situation did not match any of his previous conquests. The humans were not responding like any species he had encountered before. As the hours passed, more strange observations accumulated. Human space traffic actually increased rather than decreased. Instead of hiding, they seemed to be moving more openly than before. Their communication networks carried what appeared to be normal civilian traffic alongside military coordination. Most puzzling of all, some human transmissions seemed to contain what could only be described as anticipation, not fear, not despair, but something that almost sounded like excitement. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we are detecting some unusual transmissions from the inner system. They appear to be activation codes for systems we cannot identify." "What kind of systems?" Kethavar demanded. "Unknown, sir. The signals are heavily encrypted, but they seem to be directed at locations throughout the Sol system. Some are going to empty space where our sensors detect nothing." Admiral Kethavar felt the first hint of unease creep into his mind. In all his years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, those instincts were telling him that something was very wrong with this situation. The awakening. The 72 hours passed slowly for Admiral Kethavar. The human response had been unlike anything in his experience, and the feeling of unease had grown stronger with each passing hour. Throughout the waiting period, human activity in the Sol system had continued to increase rather than decrease. "Time limit expired, Admiral," Commander Vexthai reported. "No formal surrender has been received from the human governments." Kethavar nodded grimly. He had hoped the primitive species would see reason, but some civilizations needed a demonstration of power before they understood their situation. "Very well. Target their largest population centers. Prepare to fire planet-killer weapons." The tactical officer brought up a holographic display of Earth. Red markers appeared over major cities around the globe. "Targets acquired, Admiral. Primary targets include locations they call New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, and Moscow. Dreadnoughts Death's Hand, Starbreaker, and World Ender are ready to fire." "All ships, this is Admiral Kethavar," he announced to the fleet. "These primitives have chosen to resist the inevitable. We will demonstrate the price of defying the Zephyrian Empire. Dreadnoughts, you are authorized to fire at will." 3 massive ships at the front of the formation powered up their main weapons. Each planet-killer cannon was 50 meters wide and capable of punching through a planet's crust. The energy buildup was visible as a blue glow that grew brighter and brighter. "Firing solutions locked," reported the weapons officer on the deaths, and a planet killer charging at 90%, 95, 100%. Firing now. 3 beams of concentrated destruction lanced across space toward Earth. Each beam carried enough energy to level a continent. The Admiral watched with satisfaction as the deadly light raced toward the human world. But then something impossible happened. The beams simply stopped. A few thousand kilometers above Earth's surface, the planet-killer weapon struck something that should not have existed. The air around Earth shimmered and blazed with absorbed energy as massive defensive shields became visible for the first time. "What?" Admiral Kethavar shot to his feet. "That is impossible. Our sensors detected no shield generators." The energy shields around Earth glowed brighter as they absorbed the full power of the planet-killer weapons. Instead of being destroyed, the defensive barriers seemed to grow stronger. The entire planet was protected by a shield network that had somehow remained completely invisible until the moment of attack. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out in alarm. "I am detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system." Objects are appearing on sensors that were not there before. The holographic display updated rapidly as new contacts filled the screen. What had appeared to be empty space around the Sol system was suddenly revealed to be full of massive installations. Weapons platforms the size of small moons materialized as their stealth systems deactivated. Battle stations that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian dreadnoughts appeared at key positions throughout the system. "Impossible," Commander Vexthai whispered. "How are these hidden from our sensors?" Before anyone could answer, the human counterattack began. The first shot came from a weapons platform that had appeared near Jupiter. A beam of pure white energy, unlike anything in Zephyrian technology, reached across the system in seconds. It struck the dreadnought Death's Hand with pinpoint accuracy. The massive warship, which had been designed to survive the explosion of a star, simply vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, completely erased from existence as if it had never been there at all. "Death's hand is gone," shouted the communications officer. "No debris, no energy signature, completely gone." Admiral Kethavar stared at the empty space where his flagship's sister ship had been moments before. How is that possible? What kind of weapon can completely destroy a dreadnought without leaving any trace? More shots came from different positions around the system. Each beam was perfectly aimed and devastatingly effective. Zephyrian ships that had never known defeat were being erased from reality one by one. The weapons seemed to ignore shields, armor, and every defensive system the Empire had ever developed. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethvar shouted. "All ships begin random movement patterns." But the human weapons adapted faster than Zephyrian ships could move. The beams curved through space, following their targets with impossible precision. No matter how the alien ships twisted and turned, the white energy found them. "Admiral, look at this." The tactical officer's voice was filled with panic. "The weapons are learning. Each shot is more accurate than the last." On the display, Kethvar could see the terrible truth. The human weapons were not just powerful, they were intelligent. Each beam that fired was slightly more effective than the previous one. The targeting systems were analyzing Zephyrian movement patterns and adapting in real time. Then the human ships appeared. They came out of nowhere, materializing from stealth systems that made Zephyrian technology look primitive, sleek angular vessels that moved with impossible grace and speed. They were smaller than the massive Imperial dreadnoughts, but something about them radiated deadly purpose. "New contacts," the sensor officer reported. "Human ships are appearing throughout the system. Count as... I cannot get an accurate count. They are moving too fast for our sensors to track properly." The human vessels moved like living things, weaving between the lumbering Zephyrian ships with perfect coordination. Their weapons were different from the massive platform guns. These fired rapid pulses of energy that seemed to find the exact weak points in Imperial armor. "They are targeting our weapon system specifically," the tactical officer observed with growing horror. "Each shot is hitting the most vulnerable point on each ship." Admiral Kethvar watched his mighty armada being systematically dismantled by an enemy that should not have existed. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds were being reduced to floating hulks in minutes. The humans were not just defeating the Imperial fleet. They were doing it with an efficiency that suggested this was easy for them. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 15,000 and climbing," came the reply. "Admiral, we need to retreat. This is not a battle we can win." But retreat was not simple when facing an enemy this advanced. Human ships appeared ahead of fleeing Zephyrian vessels, cutting off escape routes with perfect timing. It was as if they could predict exactly where each Imperial ship would try to go. "They are hurting us," Commander Vexthai realized. "Like we are animals being driven into a trap." The Admiral understood the horrible truth. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were hunting. The Zephyrian Empire, which had terrorized 3 galactic sectors, was being treated like prey by a species they had dismissed as primitive. "Get me a communication channel to the human leadership," Kethvar ordered. "Now." The channel opened and Secretary General Chen appeared on the screen again. He looked exactly as calm as he had 3 days earlier, as if the complete destruction of an interstellar armada was perfectly normal. "Admiral Kethvar," Chen said politely, "I trust you are beginning to understand the situation more clearly now." "What are you?" Kethvar demanded. "Our intelligence said you were primitive." "You barely have interplanetary travel." Chen smiled, and for the first time the Admiral saw something cold and dangerous in the human's eyes. "You made the mistake of confusing what we choose to show with what we are capable of. Humanity has been preparing for visitors like you for a very long time." Another wave of Zephyrian ships vanished from the sensors. The Admiral realized that his mighty armada was being destroyed by an enemy that was barely trying. "Please," Kethvar found himself saying. "We surrender. Call off your attack." "I am afraid it is too late for surrender," Chen replied. "You came here intending to enslave or destroy us. We cannot allow that kind of threat to leave our system and potentially return with reinforcements." The Admiral felt ice form in his blood. "You mean to destroy us all?" "Not all," Chen said. "We will allow some of your ships to escape. Someone needs to carry word back to your empire about what happened here. Consider yourselves messengers." The screen went dark, leaving Admiral Kethvar staring at his own reflection in the blank display. Around him, The bridge crew worked frantically at their stations as the systematic destruction of the Imperial Armada continued outside. The hunt. The systematic destruction of the Zephyrian fleet continued with terrifying efficiency. Admiral Kethvar watched helplessly as his once mighty armada was reduced to scattered groups of desperate survivors. What had begun as a routine conquest had become a nightmare beyond his worst fears. "Status report," he ordered, though he dreaded the answer. Commander Vexthai's voice was hollow with shock. 37,000 ships destroyed or disabled. Communication with fleet sectors 7 through 12 has been completely lost. Remaining vessels are scattered across the outer system, attempting to reach minimum safe distance for hyperspace jumps. "Attempting?" Kethvar asked. "The humans are jamming our hyperspace drives," the tactical officer reported. "Some kind of field generator is preventing transition to faster-than-light travel. Every time a ship tries to jump, the field collapses the hyperspace window." The admiral felt his last hope crumble. Without hyperspace capability, his ships were trapped in the Sol system with an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. How is that possible? Hyperspace field manipulation is theoretical technology. Even the Empire's best scientists have never successfully won. "Admiral," the sensor officer interrupted. "The human ships are regrouping. They appear to be forming some kind of hunting formation." On the tactical display, the remaining human vessels were organizing themselves into small groups. Each group moved to surround clusters of Zephyrian survivors. It was like watching predators organize to bring down wounded prey. "They are not destroying the remaining ships immediately," Commander Vexthai observed. "Why are they waiting?" The answer came over the communication channels. Human voices, speaking in perfect Zephyrian language, began broadcasting to the scattered Imperial ships. "Attention Zephyrian vessels. This is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force. You are now experiencing a practical demonstration of human military doctrine. Please observe carefully, as you will be expected to report these details accurately when you return to your empire." Admiral Kethvar listened in disbelief. The humans were treating this like a training exercise, using his fleet as a teaching example. "First lesson," Commander Mitchell continued. "Information warfare. For the past 6 months, while your fleet traveled toward our system, we have been studying your ships, your technology, and your tactics through quantum entanglement scanners that you do not possess the science to detect." The Admiral's blood ran cold. They had been observed and analyzed during their entire journey without knowing it. Second lesson, adaptive defense systems. Your planet-killer weapons were absorbed by our shield network and converted into additional power for our defensive grid. Every shot you fired made our defenses stronger. On his screen, Kethvar could see Earth's shields still glowing with absorbed energy. The humans had turned the Empire's most powerful weapons into a source of power for their own systems. Third lesson, predictive combat algorithms. Our targeting computers have analyzed the movement patterns, decision trees, and tactical responses of 47 different alien species. Your actions follow predictable patterns that our systems learned to counter within the first 10 minutes of combat. The systematic nature of the defeat was becoming clear. The humans had not just been lucky or surprisingly advanced. They had been specifically prepared for this exact type of encounter. Fourth lesson, psychological warfare. Observe your current mental state. Notice how the certainty of your superiority has been replaced by confusion and fear. This emotional disruption is intentional and calculated to reduce your combat effectiveness. Admiral Kethvar realized that his growing panic was exactly what the humans wanted. They were manipulating his psychological state as precisely as they controlled their weapons. Fifth lesson, technological superiority through concealment. What you perceived as a primitive civilization was actually a carefully maintained deception. Humanity has possessed faster-than-light travel for over 2 centuries. Our true technology level is approximately 800 years ahead of your current capabilities. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had not discovered a primitive world to conquer. They had stumbled into the territory of a species far more advanced than themselves. Final lesson, strategic doctrine. Observe how we have eliminated your combat effectiveness while preserving a significant number of your personnel. This is intentional. Dead enemies cannot carry messages. You survivors will return to your empire with detailed reports of this encounter. Commander Mitchell's voice took on a colder tone. You will inform your leaders that Earth is not available for conquest. You will explain that any future approach to this system will be met with immediate and total destruction. You will make it clear that humanity is now aware of your empire's existence and is displeased with your general conduct toward other species. The communication paused, and when it resumed, there was something almost playful in the human commander's voice. Oh, and one more thing. We have been monitoring your communications with your homeworlds. We know the locations of your major colony systems, your military bases, and your capital world. Consider that information when deciding how to proceed. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. The humans had not just defeated the Imperial fleet, they had been playing with them. Every aspect of the battle had been controlled and orchestrated by an enemy who had known exactly what would happen from the very beginning. "Admiral," whispered the communications officer. They knew everything. "Our fleet positions, our tactical manuals, our response patterns. How is that possible?" Kethavar did not answer. He was beginning to understand the scope of humanity's deception. A species that could maintain such an elaborate facade for decades or centuries was far more dangerous than simple military superiority suggested. The human ships began moving again, herding the survivors toward the edge of the system. Their movements were precise and coordinated, allowing the Zephyrian vessels to group together while preventing any attempt to reorganize for another attack. "They are giving us a corridor," the navigation officer reported. "A direct path to the hyperspace jump point." "The jamming field is being selectively reduced," added the sensor officer. "Ships in the corridor are showing restored hyperspace capability." Admiral Kethvar understood. The humans were allowing them to leave, but only in the direction and manner they chose. Even in defeat, the Zephyrian fleet was being controlled by their enemy. "All remaining ships," he broadcast to his scattered forces, "move to the designated corridor. Prepare for immediate hyperspace jump as soon as capability is restored." As the survivors limped toward their escape route, more human ships appeared to escort them. The vessels moved alongside the Imperial ships like guards, ensuring prisoners reached their destination safely. "Admiral," Commander Vextai said quietly, "what do we tell High Command?" Kethavar looked at the tactical display showing the handful of ships that remained from his mighty armada. 50,000 vessels had arrived at Earth. Less than 5,000 would return home. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We tell them that we found something in the Sol system that is far more dangerous than we ever imagined. We tell them that humanity is not a primitive species to be conquered, but a sleeping giant that we should never have awakened." The last Zephyrian ships reached the hyperspace jump point. One by one, they vanished from normal space, carrying their terrible news back toward the Empire. Behind them, Earth continued to orbit peacefully around its star, looking exactly as innocent and primitive as it had when they first arrived. But Admiral Kethvar now knew the truth. Humanity had revealed itself to be the apex predator of the galaxy, and the Zephyrian Empire had just become their prey. New apex predators. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the news had spread throughout the galaxy like a virus. The destruction of the Zephyrian Imperial Armada was no longer a secret that could be contained. Admiral Kethvar's surviving ships had reached the Empire's outer colonies, and their reports had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. On the Zephyrian capital world of Zeph Prime, Emperor Valthek the Conqueror sat in his throne room, reading the military reports for the 100th time. The golden walls around him were covered with trophies from 300 conquered worlds. Now those victories seemed small and meaningless. 45,000 ships, the Emperor muttered to himself. Our finest fleet, gone. General Thaxamor, the Empire's highest military commander, stood before the throne with his head bowed. Your Majesty, the survivors' reports are consistent. The humans possess technology far beyond our understanding. They defeated our forces without apparent effort. Lies, Emperor Valthek said, but his voice lacked conviction. A primitive species cannot simply develop such advanced technology without anyone knowing. The evidence suggests they have been concealing their true capabilities for centuries. General Thaxamor replied carefully. Our intelligence networks found no trace of their real technology because they never wanted us to find it. The Emperor rose from his throne and walked to the great window overlooking the capital city. Billions of Zephyrians went about their daily lives below, unaware that their empire's reign of terror had come to an abrupt end. What do the other powers say? He asked. The Krillian Federation is withdrawing all military forces to their core systems, the general reported. The hegemony has suspended all expansion operations. Even the Void Hunters have gone silent. Everyone is afraid, Your Majesty, and they had reason to be afraid. Word of humanity's capabilities was spreading through every communication network in the galaxy. The species that had conquered 3 galactic sectors, enslaved hundreds of worlds, and inspired fear across the known universe had been destroyed by beings they had dismissed as primitives. But the real terror came from what happened after the battle. Human ships had begun appearing in distant star systems. Not invasion fleets or military expeditions, but small groups of vessels that observed, recorded, and then vanished again. They moved through space with impossible stealth, appearing only when they chose to be seen. On the mining world of Kepler Station, Administrator Vexhall received his first direct contact with humanity. He had been processing slave labor from 6 different species when the human ship appeared in orbit without warning. Kepler Station. Came the transmission in perfect Zephyrian language. This is Captain James Rodriguez of the Terran vessel Moral Reckoning. We need to talk. The single human ship was smaller than a Zephyrian patrol craft, but Administrator Vexhall felt his stomach turn to ice. If the reports from Sol were true, that tiny vessel could probably destroy his entire mining operation without effort. What? What do you want? He managed to ask. We want you to release all enslaved personnel immediately, Captain Rodriguez replied. You have 1 hour to transfer them to our ship. After that, we will consider any remaining slaves to be hostages, and we will respond accordingly. You cannot do this, Vexhall protested. These workers belong to the Empire. This station is Imperial territory. Administrator Vexhall, the human said, and his voice carried a chill that made the Zephyrian's blood freeze. Let me be very clear about something. The Zephyrian Empire no longer exists. You simply have not been officially informed yet. The transmission continued with terrifying calm. In approximately 6 hours, Admiral Kethavar will arrive at Zeph Prime with what remains of your mighty armada. He will inform your Emperor that the age of Zephyrian expansion has ended permanently. Your choice now is simple. Comply with our humanitarian demands, or discover why 45,000 warships were not enough to protect a single planet. Administrator Vexhall looked at his screens, showing the thousands of enslaved beings working in his mines. Then he looked at the human ship hanging in space like a small deadly star. I will begin the release procedures immediately, he said. Similar encounters were happening throughout Zephyrian space. Human ships appeared wherever the Empire had established slave operations, mining colonies, or military outposts. They made the same demand every time. Release all enslaved beings immediately or face the consequences. Most administrators complied. A few tried to resist or call for military support. Those installations simply vanished from the galaxy, leaving behind empty space and scattered debris that would serve as warnings to others. The message was clear. Humanity had not just defeated the Zephyrian Empire. They had appointed themselves as the galaxy's new moral authority. Other species began to receive visits as well. The Krillian Federation found human ships studying their military installations. The hegemony discovered that their secret research projects were no longer secret. The Void Hunters learned that their raiding fleets were being tracked and observed wherever they went. On the independent world of Nexus 7, the ruling council received an unexpected diplomatic communication. Greetings, said Ambassador Elena Vasquez, speaking from her ship in orbit. We are representatives of the human government. We understand that your world has remained neutral in galactic conflicts and has treated all species with respect and dignity. Council leader Zixtar was relieved to hear a friendly tone after weeks of terrifying reports about human military capabilities. We want to establish formal diplomatic relations with Nexus 7, the ambassador continued. We are prepared to offer advanced medical technology, improved agricultural systems, and defensive assistance in exchange for a simple agreement. What kind of agreement? Council leader Zixtar asked. A mutual defense pact, Ambassador Vasquez replied. Any attempt to attack, enslave, or conquer your world will be met with immediate human intervention. In return, we ask only that you continue your current policies of treating all species as equals. The offer was almost too good to believe. Protection from the species that had just destroyed the galaxy's most powerful military force, in exchange for continuing to do what they were already doing. We accept, Zixtar said quickly. Similar offers were being made to dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. Peaceful species found themselves under human protection almost overnight. Aggressive empires discovered that their expansion plans had become impossible to implement. Back on Zeph Prime, Emperor Valthek received his final report as leader of the Zephyrian Empire. Your Majesty, General Thaxmore said quietly, we have lost contact with 70% of our outer colonies. The ones still reporting say they are releasing all slave populations as ordered by human forces. Ordered? The Emperor asked. The humans are not requesting, Your Majesty. They are giving direct orders and expecting immediate compliance. Any world that refuses is removed. Emperor Valthek slumped in his throne. The empire that had taken 3 centuries to build was collapsing in a matter of months. What about our allies? The other military powers? All major powers are entering isolation protocols, the general reported. No one wants to attract human attention. The galaxy is reorganizing itself around the assumption that humanity is now the dominant military force. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked the question that terrified him most. What do the humans want? What is their endgame? General Thaxmore consulted his reports. Based on their actions so far, they appear to want the end of slavery, the protection of peaceful species, and the establishment of, they call it basic galactic morality. They are conquering the galaxy to impose their moral code? Not conquering, Your Majesty. More like managing. They seem to view themselves as the galaxy's new peacekeepers. Emperor Valthek realized the true scope of what had happened. Humanity had not just defeated the Zephyrian Empire. They had stepped into the role of galactic protectors, appointing themselves as guardians of species that could not protect themselves. Across the galaxy, the balance of power had shifted completely. The age of conquest and slavery was ending, replaced by something unprecedented, a dominant species that used its power to protect rather than exploit. Humanity had become the apex predator of the galaxy, but they hunted only those who preyed on the innocent. For peaceful species, the humans were guardians. For aggressive empires, they were the ultimate threat. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of fear was over, replaced by something humanity called justice. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their silent patrol, ensuring that no species would ever again face the kind of threat that Earth had effortlessly destroyed.